Bloomwood Park was a neighborhood designed for tranquil living, or so the marketing brochures claimed. Its pastel-hued houses sat in neat rows, each with freshly manicured lawns, white picket fences, and the occasional flower bed bursting with tulips or rose bushes. A stone monument near the entrance featured a stylized tree logo and the words, "Bloomwood Park, a place to grow." Founded about 2 decades ago, Bloomwood Park quickly garnered a reputation for its well-run homeowners association. To outsiders, the association's rulebook seemed borderline excessive. Regulations on fence height, permissible mailbox designs, even the color palette for seasonal decorations. Yet many residents happily paid their dues, relishing the idea that uniform standards and communal activities would keep property values stable and encourage neighborly connections. Chief among Bloomwood Park's communal amenities was a modest picnic area located near the middle of the development. It included sturdy wooden tables under a large pavilion, a small playground with bright slides and monkey bars, plus a wide lawn perfect for kite flying or weekend soccer scrimmages. The HOA meticulously maintained these grounds, ensuring the area was free of trash and the grass remained clipped to regulation length. Most days, the picnic area bustled with families seeking fresh air, especially in warmer months. Kids dashed around playing tag or hopscotch, while parents grilled burgers or swapped stories of the week's minor triumphs and tribulations. On the surface, Bloomwood Park exuded the harmonious suburban ideal. Yet behind the scenes lurked a tension that would soon explode into a dramatic confrontation, one that would forever reshape how neighbors coexisted in this outwardly idyllic place. At the center of that tension stood Harriet Lockridge, a woman widely referred to as Karen behind her back. In the eyes of many, Harriet was less a caretaker of communal welfare and more a self-appointed overseer, eager to police even the smallest perceived infractions. Harriet Lockridge was in her late 50s, meticulously groomed, with a helmet of ash-brown hair styled into an unyielding bob. She favored pastel blouses paired with pressed capri pants, often completing the look with gold earrings and a faux leather clipboard. This clipboard was her constant companion, brimming with official HOA notices, violations ready to be handed out, and lists of rules. Harriet took her role as an HOA board member extremely seriously, reveling in the authority to issue warnings or fines. While Harriet claimed her only ambition was preserving the integrity of Bloomwood Park, many neighbors found her approach grating. She'd march along sidewalks, noting overgrown hedges, scolding teens for leaving bikes on the grass, or taping stern letters onto front doors over minor missteps. Her favorite word was compliance, always delivered in a tone that brooked no argument. To Harriet, order was paramount. She loathed any sign of chaos or clutter. If a child's toy lay abandoned on a lawn for a moment, Harriet might appear, scolding the parents for disrupting the neighborhood's aesthetics. If someone's trash bin was left out past the designated hour, Harriet was sure to voice her disapproval. Despite frequent eye rolls and exasperated sighs, few confronted her directly, preferring to avoid conflict. Behind Harriet's facade of devotion to rules, however, simmered a deeper frustration. She craved recognition for her service, yet rarely found the gratitude she believed she deserved. Bloomwood Park residents, though polite, mostly saw her as a busybody. Each day, Harriet felt more unappreciated, until a group of carefree children coloring at a picnic table triggered her pent-up resentment, sending her over the edge in an act of brazen cruelty. One sunny Saturday in early June, the Bloomwood Park picnic area hummed with activity. Families flocked under the pavilion to escape the midday sun. A gentle breeze rustled the tall oaks lining the perimeter, and the mouth-watering scent of grilled hot dogs wafted through the air. Trish Gomez, a friendly mother of 3, arrived around noon. Her older 2 kids ran off to climb the monkey bars, while her youngest, Emma, a bright-eyed 6-year-old, lingered by the picnic tables, fishing out her beloved coloring books from a small tote bag. Emma adored drawing and coloring, often losing herself in vibrant pictures of unicorns, forests, or cartoon animals. Soon, more children joined. Noah, a quiet boy with a penchant for shading intricate geometric patterns, Layla, who loved bright neon markers, and Marcus, carrying a half-finished comic he was illustrating. They set up a little workstation across 2 tables, pushing aside ketchup bottles and paper plates to make room for pencils, crayons, markers, and a rainbow of coloring books. A few scraps of paper fluttered about as the breeze picked up, but overall, the kids kept their area tidy. Trish smiled, pleased to see the children bonding over art. She chatted with other parents, occasionally glancing over to ensure Emma and her friends were safe. The children giggled and swapped crayons, comparing each other's sketches. The picnic area took on a whimsical flair, courtesy of these miniature art studios, forming spontaneously amid the summer warmth. Unbeknownst to them, Harriet Lockridge was on her routine patrol. Across the green, she spotted a swirl of color and clutter. Markers rolled precariously near table edges. Coloring books stacked haphazardly. Harriet frowned, muttering under her breath. If she had a chance, she might have demanded the kids tidy up. But for now, she steeled herself, marching closer. The children, heads bent over their pages, were too engrossed to notice the stormy expression forming on Harriet's face. The kids soon fell into a comfortable rhythm. Emma flipped to a page of cartoon kitties, carefully shading each feline a different pastel hue. Noah tackled a detailed mandala, focusing intently on balancing his color scheme. Marcus doodled speech bubbles for his comic hero, while Layla hunched over a bright pink unicorn. Chatter about crayons versus markers, or how best to blend colors, filled the air. A row of plastic cups lined one corner of the table, each holding a batch of markers upright. Crayon shards lay in small piles, their wrappers peeled back from heavy use. The children minded their space. Trish had taught Emma to keep items neatly, and the other parents had done the same. But inevitably, bits of paper and the occasional stray pencil migrated beyond the table's surface. One child rummaged for a missing purple marker under the bench, returning triumphantly seconds later. For passers-by, the scene was heartwarming. Kids engaged in a wholesome, screen-free pastime, sharing laughter under the sun. A couple of parents even took pictures. Some older neighbors, strolling by, paused to compliment the children's artwork. Others offered a few extra crayons from home, encouraging the little artists. But Harriet Lockridge viewed the same scene through a different lens. All she saw was mess, visual clutter, and the creeping chaos that threatened the neat aesthetics of Bloomwood Park. Each time a colored pencil rolled onto the ground, Harriet's jaw tightened. She recognized many of these kids from prior infractions she'd noted, like riding scooters on the sidewalk or leaving chalk drawings that ruined the walkway's pristine look. Harriet believed wholeheartedly that such unregulated creative expression would degrade the community's polished standards if left unchecked. At first, Harriet lingered at a distance, arms crossed, scowling. Perhaps, she thought, she'd approach the parents to demand the children pick up their crayons. But then she noticed a breeze scattering a few coloring pages onto another bench. Harriet's irritation spiked. Any notion of calm disapproval twisted into a bristling fury. She decided she'd confront them now, once and for all. As Harriet marched toward the kids, her mind replayed every minor annoyance she'd endured recently. A neighbor leaving out a lawn flamingo, a teen skateboard on the sidewalk, a front door painted slightly off the approved shade. Each example solidified her belief that Bloomwood Park was slipping into disorder. Now, these children with their coloring frenzy were the last straw. Of course, Harriet recognized that publicly berating children might seem harsh. She intended to approach more gently at first, maybe instruct them to pack up their mess in a polite but firm tone. If the parents objected, Harriet would brandish the HOA's broad clause about maintaining tidy common areas. She had the text memorized. Residents shall ensure no clutter or obstructions hamper the collective enjoyment of communal property. She believed coloring books, pens, crayons, and scraps of paper fell squarely under clutter. But Harriet's simmering anger had reached a boiling point. As she neared the tables, she overheard the kids squealing with laughter over a silly cartoon Layla had drawn. Harriet's eyes flicked to the rainbow of supplies splayed across the picnic bench. She spotted a half-torn page drifting along the ground. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "They're not controlling their materials," she whispered in disgust. She didn't realize she was trembling with rage. Years of micromanaging and underappreciation on the HOA board had left Harriet feeling her authority was always undermined. Now, a group of carefree youngsters ignoring her beloved order set her off. Harriet's steps sped up. In her left hand, She clutched a small container of black ink, originally intended for marking official forms. Without a coherent plan, Harriet advanced, determined to reassert control in a show of force that defied any notion of civility. Emma was adding finishing touches to a butterfly drawing when Harriet's shadow fell over the picnic table. The kids glanced up, startled by the stern figure looming above them. Harriet's expression was hostile, her voice brittle. "This is not an art studio," she snapped. "Pick up this mess immediately." The children exchanged wide-eyed looks. Emma stammered. We were just coloring. My mom said it was okay." Harriet's face contorted. "It's not okay to scatter paper and crayons everywhere. You're turning the picnic area into a junkyard." In a reflex of fear, the kids began gathering their supplies. But Harriet's frustration exploded. "No, you all need to learn a lesson about respecting shared spaces." She stepped closer, brandishing the small plastic bottle of black ink. Before anyone could comprehend her intent, Harriet flicked her wrist sharply. A splash of dark ink rained down on the coloring pages spread across the table. Shrieks erupted from Emma, Layla, and Noah as they scrambled back, watching black splotches bleed across their bright drawings. Another wave of Harriet's hand sent more ink splattering across the table. "You can't just do this here," she bellowed, raw anger distorting her voice. Horrified, Marcus yanked his comic away, but droplets of ink stained the page. The children stared, some on the verge of tears, as their lovingly colored pictures drowned in black. Parents nearby dashed over, alarmed by the noise. Trish Gomez arrived first, eyes widening at the inky chaos. "What is going on?" she demanded. Harriet glared. "They can't sprawl their junk all over. It's disruptive. I told them to pick it up. This is the result of their carelessness." She tossed the nearly empty ink bottle aside. Outrage rippled through the onlookers. Emma clutched her ruined coloring book, tears streaking her cheeks as large black stains obliterated her pastel shading. Layla tried salvaging a marker from the inky pool, hands shaking. Harriet, breathing heavily, realized how appalling her actions must appear, but doubled down. "Maybe next time, they won't leave their clutter," she spat. The moment crystallized in stunned silence, broken only by sniffles from the children and gasps of furious parents. Harriet Lockridge had revealed the depth of her rage and pettiness. No longer was she just a bossy board member. She'd become the villain who destroyed children's art in a fit of control-obsessed madness. Word of Harriet's outburst spread like wildfire. Within hours, residents across Bloomwood Park learned that Harriet Karen Lockridge had splashed black ink on children's coloring books. Photos surfaced online, capturing crumpled, ink-stained pages and tearful little faces. Outraged neighbors lit up social media forums and group texts, demanding Harriet face consequences for vandalizing a kid's property. By evening, an emergency meeting of the HOA board was announced. Typically, such gatherings tackled minor disputes, like trash violations or budget adjustments. This time, the entire community was on edge. Harriet herself retreated to her home, blinds drawn, phone presumably off the hook. Some speculated she might concoct a defense, claiming the children posed a hazard or that the ink assault was accidental. But the images of splotched coloring pages told a starkly different story. For years, Harriet's officious meddling had annoyed or exasperated neighbors. Now, her actions had crossed an ethical and moral line. She had traumatized children. Even residents who'd once respected Harriet's drive for order found themselves appalled by her cruelty. Many parents whispered that Harriet had no right to remain on the HOA board, that she should resign or be expelled. Meanwhile, the kids she'd targeted were left reeling. Emma refused to pick up a crayon at home that evening, upset that her big butterfly picture was ruined. Marcus said nothing, but kept glaring at the ink stains on his comic, now unreadable in places. Layla recounted Harriet's angry face in trembling detail, spooked by an adult's unpredictable aggression. Trish comforted them, promising that the neighborhood would stand up against Harriet's bullying. In an instant, the veneer of Bloomwood Park's perfect suburban harmony cracked, revealing an undercurrent of fear and anger. If Harriet's meltdown had intended to quell visual clutter, it instead sparked a wave of indignation that would soon reshape the community's approach to children's creativity, and ultimately, their entire perspective on shared spaces. Trish Gomez spent the night consoling Emma, who kept asking why Harriet hated her pictures. The question stung. Emma's bright little face turned solemn, the easy joy of coloring tainted by a memory of black ink and harsh words. Trish realized that this incident demanded more than an apology or a single HOA meeting. It required a proactive, positive response, something that would restore the kids' faith in their community. The next morning, Trish called up several other parents and concerned residents. They gathered at a neighbor's living room, forming a kind of impromptu committee of the willing. Over coffee, the group brainstormed ways to respond. One father suggested they hold a mass coloring day to show Harriet she couldn't intimidate them. Another neighbor mentioned a possible fundraiser to replace the children's damaged books and art supplies. Then, an older woman named Pauline Carter, known for her creativity, proposed something bold. What if we create a small kiosk or station by the picnic area dedicated to children's art? A proper place with cubbies and a table just for coloring. That way, Harriet can't call it messy. It'd be an officially recognized space. The idea electrified the room. They envisioned a small, sturdy wooden kiosk with shelves to store coloring books, crayons, markers, and other craft supplies. Maybe it could have a built-in garbage bin or a compartment for paper scraps. Washable surfaces would ensure easy cleanup. The kids could enjoy coloring outdoors in a designated corner, unafraid of random acts of vandalism. This concept could be pitched to the HOA as a constructive solution that balanced Harriet's obsession with tidiness and the children's right to creativity. A plan crystallized: gather donations from neighbors to build or buy materials for the kiosk, present a formal proposal at the emergency HOA meeting. By establishing this creative corner, they defend the kids from Harriet's aggression, turn a negative event into a lasting positive, and show that Bloomwood Park refused to bow to one person's tyranny. Emma, hearing about the kiosk idea, brightened. "It's like an art fort," she said, giggling. For the first time since Harriet's outburst, the children glimpsed hope, a future where their colors could flourish, safe from black ink and hateful scorn. With the kiosk concept agreed upon, the neighbors swung into action. A small subgroup began sketching designs. Craig Milner, who once worked as a carpenter, drew up blueprint-like diagrams of a freestanding wooden structure, about 4 feet high, with a slightly angled roof to protect from light rain. Inside, it would feature compartments for crayons, markers, and coloring books, plus a built-in fold-out shelf that kids could use as a mini desk. The kiosk door could latch shut after hours or in stormy weather. Others contributed ideas: a whiteboard surface for doodles, a roll of butcher paper for group murals, hooks for small backpacks. The group insisted on painting the kiosk in bright, welcoming colors, rainbow stripes or cartoonish polka dots, making it instantly recognizable as a kid's corner. This alone defied Harriet's preference for neutral, subdued shades. But given her meltdown, few were in the mood to appease her aesthetic. Meanwhile, the Committee of the Willing compiled a budget. They canvassed the neighborhood, collecting modest donations. Parents rummaged closets for extra colored pencils, gently used coloring books, or kid-friendly chairs. A few local businesses pitched in, including a home improvement store that offered a discount on lumber. The sense of unity in Bloomwood Park soared. People who'd barely greeted each other before were now working side by side for a cause dear to their hearts. The kids, though still rattled, found excitement in the kiosk project. Emma drew a sign reading "Bloomwood Creative Corner," decorated with swirls and hearts. Noah offered to design stencils for painting the kiosk's exterior. Marcus, though older, contributed a small set of superhero-themed coloring pages he'd created himself, hoping to share them at the kiosk once it was done. The project gave them ownership, turning trauma into momentum for positive change. All the while, Harriet Lockridge remained notably absent from these discussions. If she caught wind of the plan, she stayed silent for now. But given her penchant for interference, no one doubted she'd attempt to block or sabotage the kiosk initiative. The neighbors prepared themselves for a fierce confrontation at the upcoming HOA meeting. The night before the emergency HOA meeting, Harriet Lockridge paced in her living room, phone in hand, drafting arguments. She'd learned about the kiosk proposal through the grapevine. The idea enraged her: a permanent children's art station on Bloomwood property? It was the epitome of the visual clutter she despised. Harriet believed such a fixture would degrade the polished look of the picnic area and set a precedent for uncontrolled chaos. She typed and deleted multiple diatribes, trying to find the right angle to discredit the kiosk. She considered claiming it posed a safety hazard or would lead to graffiti. Eventually, Harriet composed a lengthy email to her fellow HOA board members, warning them about unregulated expansions and the unstoppable tide of messy juveniles. She pressed send, half hoping at least one colleague would support her stance. But Harriet miscalculated the wave of sympathy for the children. The other board members had read the outraged neighborhood posts and seen the photos of ink-stained coloring pages. While they typically recognized Harriet's dedication, they were horrified by her aggression. Many concluded Harriet was dangerously out of control. Her email tirades only confirmed their suspicion that she lacked remorse. Meanwhile, Harriet's social standing plummeted. Neighbors who once tolerated her regimentation no longer hid their disdain. Some refused to wave back if she passed them on her morning patrol. Others, unsubtle, turned away when she approached. Harriet, used to being feared or at least obeyed, felt a cold shunning that stoked her bitterness. She told herself she was right. The kiosk was a slippery slope toward endless, childish trash. If the board approved it, Harriet threatened in her own mind to withdraw from the HOA entirely. Yet a small voice within her recognized she might have gone too far by attacking innocent children's art with black ink. Pride prevented her from acknowledging it. Finally, Harriet prepared for the meeting with clenched resolve, vowing to speak forcefully against any crazy kiosk. But as the hours ticked by, the once powerful Karen of Bloomwood Park realized she might stand alone, a dreaded fate for someone who thrived on authority. The emergency HOA meeting took place in the large multipurpose room at the local clubhouse. Dozens of neighbors filled the chairs, some standing along the walls. At the front table, Harriet Lockridge sat stiffly, flanked by 4 other board members, including the HOA president, Gloria Jameson. Gloria opened with a sober statement about the incident. She condemned vandalism of children's property, calling it inexcusable. Then, the floor was given to any resident wishing to speak. One by one, parents, grandparents, and even a few older teens stepped forward, recounting Harriet's pattern of overreach and referencing the meltdown at the picnic area. Trish Gomez, summoning courage, held up a black-stained coloring page. "This belongs to my daughter. It was her favorite design. Ruined," she declared, voice shaking. "We can't let this happen again. Our children deserve a safe space to color without fear." The audience murmured agreement. Next, Pauline Carter presented the kiosk proposal. She held up sketches of the small structure, highlighting features like easy-to-clean surfaces and secure cubbies. She emphasized it would be a single, neat fixture, not a messy free-for-all. Several neighbors nodded in support, praising the concept as both practical and uplifting for kids. Finally, Harriet had her turn. She insisted the kiosk would invite endless scribbles and strew paper, threatening Bloomwood Park's aesthetic. She also tried deflecting blame for the ink incident, suggesting it was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Yet her arguments sounded hollow. The board members collectively frowned. The crowd was unimpressed. When the vote was called, the result was overwhelming. The HOA board endorsed the kiosk project, subject to final design approvals. Applause erupted. Harriet sat in stunned silence, overshadowed by the community's unity. A short time later, amid continued applause, she left the meeting early, refusing to address reporters from a local news blog. Construction began almost immediately. Over the next few weekends, volunteers hammered together the kiosk skeleton, painted it cheerful shades of turquoise and green, and installed a little roof. Children excitedly scrawled their names on the inside panels in colorful marker. By midsummer, the creative corner stood proudly at the edge of the picnic area, a testament to neighborly cooperation and resilience. When the children's kiosk officially opened, it drew a crowd nearly as large as the infamous HOA meeting. Parents, kids, and curious onlookers gathered to watch a simple ribbon-cutting ceremony. Emma, wearing a proud smile, stood next to Noah and Layla. They each held a giant pair of plastic scissors to snip the ribbon. The moment they cut it, cheers and camera flashes filled the summer air. Inside the kiosk, neat cubbies showcased crayons, markers, pencils, and reams of blank paper. One shelf featured a stack of donated coloring books. Another had small plastic containers for random crafts. A short, fold-out table attached to the kiosk side provided a drawing surface. Everything was labeled with friendly signs like "Return supplies here" and "Help keep it neat." Children immediately swarmed around the kiosk, giggling and rifling through the supplies. Emma found a fresh coloring book to replace her ruined one. Noah tested a brand new pack of colored pencils, while Layla began sketching a cartoon dog. The kiosk design made it easy to keep items organized, and parents supervised gently to ensure no chaos spilled out. The entire scene radiated positivity, kids expressing themselves, neighbors offering compliments. Over time, the kiosk fostered creative projects well beyond simple coloring. Some kids pinned up small drawings for others to see. Others wrote short poems on scraps of paper and left them for new readers. A few older siblings taught younger ones how to shade or blend colors. Bluewood Park's picnic area took on a fresh vibrancy, marked by a tapestry of kid-made art. Even the once skeptical residents admitted it brightened the communal space. Trish Gomez marveled at how a single destructive act, Harriet's ink attack, led to such an outpouring of community spirit. The children's kiosk had become a rallying symbol, proving that positivity could triumph over cruelty. Every day, the kiosk's cubbies brimmed with supplies restocked by generous neighbors. And every day, children of all ages arrived to draw under the warm afternoon sun, unafraid. Though the kiosk was up and running, the community still demanded accountability for Harriet's vandalism. While Harriet had faced public scorn, many believed a formal sanction from the HOA board was necessary. After all, if any other resident had destroyed property, especially children's property, they'd likely be fined or suspended from community privileges. At the next official board meeting, the topic dominated the agenda. Gloria Jameson, the board president, presented evidence of Harriet's misconduct, including eyewitness accounts and the children's testimonies. Harriet attempted to recast her actions as an impulsive moment of frustration, not a deliberate act of sabotage. But her excuses rang hollow. Citing the HOA Code of Conduct, particularly a clause about respectful treatment of persons and property, the board voted to impose disciplinary measures on Harriet. She was removed from her post on the Community Standards Committee and required to pay for the children's replaced art supplies. Additionally, Harriet faced a formal censure letter placed in the HOA records. Harriet openly bristled at the judgment. She stormed out mid-vote, tears of anger in her eyes. The board, unmoved, passed the measure unanimously. For the first time since she'd gained her ironclad reputation, Harriet faced real consequences for her overbearing ways. Within Bloomwood Park's private social media group, the reaction was celebratory. Parents posted pictures of their children happily coloring, captioned with messages like, "Justice served." Meanwhile, Harriet found herself largely ostracized. Some neighbors snubbed her attempts at small talk. Others suggested she step away from the HOA altogether. The once dreaded Karen of Bloomwood Park discovered her power drastically reduced. No longer could she roam the sidewalks, brandishing violation slips with impunity. The community had turned the page, literally and metaphorically. As summer deepened into late July, Harriet Lockridge lived in an unfamiliar reality. She no longer held her seat on the Community Standards Committee, though she still resided in the same immaculate home. Her once constant patrols grew sporadic. When Harriet did venture out, she stuck to the perimeter of the neighborhood, avoiding the busy picnic area, refusing to lay eyes on the kiosk. Rumors claimed she had attempted to rally a small group of like-minded order enthusiasts, but found no real support. People recognized her meltdown for what it was, bullying, plain and simple. In quiet moments, Harriet might have reflected on how swiftly the tide had turned. She had spent years enforcing rules in Bloomwood Park, certain she was the neighborhood's guardian. Yet a single, impulsive act of vandalizing children's coloring books shattered her standing and isolated her socially. Pride kept her from offering a genuine apology. Instead, she occasionally penned letters to the board, complaining of unregulated new structures, the kiosk, or excessive child gatherings. But they read like the rantings of a bitter outlier. The board routinely dismissed them. Meanwhile, the kiosk thrived as a joyful hub. Day after day, Harriet watched from a distance as parents and kids gathered around it, rummaging for fresh crayons, leaving behind small masterpieces. She might have glimpsed the unstoppable momentum of community spirit. Some evenings, Harriet felt pangs of regret or envy. These families were forging bonds she herself never managed to foster. But acknowledging that envy meant acknowledging her mistakes, something Harriet wasn't ready to do. Over time, Harriet became a cautionary tale, an example of how extremist pursuit of compliance could alienate an entire neighborhood. When new residents asked about the kiosk story, they inevitably heard about the day Harriet splashed ink on children's drawings. The final moral was always the same. Bloomwood Park refused to let cruelty prevail. The kiosk stood as physical proof of that pledge. By summer's end, Bloomwood Park radiated a renewed sense of community, bolstered by the newly minted Children's Creative Corner that stood under the picnic area's pavilion. Families made a ritual of strolling there on weekends, arms full of coloring supplies or craft kits. Kids discovered fresh crayons daily, donated by neighbors who restocked the kiosk without prompting. Some even taped up finished drawings, forming a rotating gallery on the kiosk's walls. Trish Gomez often found Emma perched happily at the kiosk, coloring a unicorn or a flower scene. The black ink trauma had faded into a distant memory, replaced by proud scribbles and new pages full of color. Marcus's superhero comics, once tainted by Harriet's ink, had been redrawn and pinned up for younger kids to admire. Noah and Layla discovered new friends who also loved art, forging friendships that crossed grade levels. The ink attack came to symbolize a turning point, a moment where the neighborhood realized that an obsessive devotion to neatness could be harmful if it lacked empathy. In the months that followed, the HOA's approach softened. They still enforced essential guidelines, but the rigid scrutiny Harriet once championed diminished. People breathed easier, able to incorporate personal touches, like small flower pots or whimsical yard decor, without fear of a harsh citation. As for Harriet Karen Lockridge, she remained in Bloomwood Park, though her voice no longer dominated. Some neighbors maintained polite greetings if they passed her on the sidewalk. Others politely avoided her. Occasionally, Harriet glared at the kiosk from afar, but no one saw her try to damage it again. Over time, the anger she carried seemed to subside into quiet resignation. In the broader timeline of Bloomwood Park's history, Harriet's meltdown was just a brief flash of cruelty. But the kiosk that sprang from it became a lasting gift. Year-round, children found a place to express themselves, to discover new forms of creativity. The kiosk also offered parents a chance to connect, exchanging tips, watching over each other's kids, forging deeper bonds than ever before. The bright swirl of crayons, markers, and sketches under the pavilion was a daily reminder that even in suburban America, where well-tended lawns and strict HOAs define life, acts of kindness, empathy, and imaginative freedom can prevail. Thus ended the saga of Harriet's ink-splashing tantrum. The so-called Karen had hoped to rid Bloomwood Park of visual clutter, but instead, her outburst gave birth to an even more vibrant, organized, and heartfelt artistic space for children. The kiosk stood as a testament to the power of collective good, coloring Bloomwood Park's future in shades as bright and hopeful as the pages Emma and her friends filled each day.